Andy Slavitt, entrepreneur, innovator, disruptor, and at one point, administrator for CMS. Welcome to Juicing with Gary.
Hey Gary, thanks for having me.
I've made this juice just for you. Do you know what I call this, Andy?
What do you call it?
Good morning, good morning. It's great to be with you. Good morning to you. Ba, 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 ba. Debbie Reynolds made that famous, and Gene Kelly back in 1952. So I call this Good Morning Andy. We're gonna start with some wonderful oranges. Just slice them right in half. Grab some carrots and slice them right up. We're gonna just stick them right down in there. Okay, let's get going, Andy. I want you to just start, we're gonna feed it all in. You just start putting it all in there for me. Yeah, get them in there. Let's get those carrots down in there. Helps us see a little bit better, they say, right?
Sure.
Let's get an orange one down in there. Let's get it. Get them right down in there. There we go. How are we doing? Let's get some red in there. We need some red. And the colors matter, you know.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, is that gorgeous or what? Here, now you can stir it up for us. All right, Andy, now we're gonna pour some juices and we're gonna get ready to sit down and have a great conversation. So if you'll just do the honor. Oh, beautiful. Look at how nice that is. I bet you're gonna love this juice. So Andy, in seriousness, we're really grateful to have you here today. Thank you so much for juicing. Now let's go have a conversation, talk about how we can change the world.
Let's do it. Thank you. Cheers.
Andy, there's a lot we'd like to learn about you, about your thoughts, about your visions, and about the work that you're doing, you and your colleagues. And pretty exciting to have you here at Health in Las Vegas. So welcome to Las Vegas as well.
Good to be here.
It's the future of healthcare, and you've been a driver in that. So Andy, everyone has a story. I'd love to hear your story. Tell me about Andy.
Sure. Well, most people don't know this, Gary, but I swore I would never, ever go into healthcare. I felt like, and still to this day feel like, the business of healthcare sometimes competes against the human need. And so I had a hard time with that. But when I was about 31 years old, my roommate in college got diagnosed and died of a brain tumor. And that led me on a journey to ultimately start a company to help solve the kinds of problems that his widow and at that time he had twin 1-year-old kids who moved in with my wife and I in our house because they had no money, they had no insurance, and they had tons of medical bills. And they were, like many of us at that most vulnerable point in your lives, victims of a system that didn't work for them. So I started a company. We now would call it a digital health company. Back in the 90s, we called it a .com. Remember those days? And it was really aimed at helping people who were uninsured or underinsured with their medical bills and get access to healthcare services at prices and at experiences that would essentially be more close to what a managed care company played. And at the time, it was a sort of part of the early wave of what people talked about as consumerism. But it led me into healthcare. Ultimately, that company I ran for about 4 years, and that led me down a path where I ultimately ended up overseeing a business called Optum for a while, and that led me through another series of misadventures to being the lead firefighter for turning around healthcare.gov, which was the big rollout of the Affordable Care Act. I ultimately ended up in the administration for the last 2 years of the Obama administration, overseeing Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So launched in and found increasing opportunities to try to have an impact on the kinds of problems that we were seeing.
Tell me, what do you see as our big problems today? I mean, we see great things that are happening, emerging technology companies and solutions, but yet we still have rising disease, conditions, and costs. What's going wrong?
Well, I might say that we're focused in some of the wrong places. We get together at conferences like this, which is a terrific conference with, as you said, I think over 3,000 people, smart people who have a lot of energy, a lot of capital, a lot of ideas. And I will venture to say that 90% of what you'll hear today and throughout this place are about things to make our own lives better. A better Fitbit to help us. Something that takes healthy people and allows us to be athletes and track our steps. We'll hear about AI and capabilities and so forth. But what very few people are talking about, which I think you'll hear less of, is the focus on what are some of the underlying challenges we have, which are large populations of people that have, I think, fairly common set of medical conditions that are often served by Medicare, often served by Medicaid, where we've completely underinvested in areas like behavioral health and housing and nutrition primary care, and all the things that are driving a lot of the costs and the bad experiences in the healthcare system. And Gary, one of the things that I think is sort of a truism around anybody is we all, when we experience the healthcare system, it is at our most vulnerable points. I don't care if you're as steeped in healthcare as you or I, or if you're just coming upon it for the first time. When you're in it personally, it feels very different. And I think we, as a set of leaders and as an investment community, tend to ignore what we know. We tend to ignore that fundamental truism, that this ultimate kitchen table issue, how we're going to take care of our families, afford our medications, be able to get to the doctor, stay healthy, stay out of the hospital, get treated in comfortable settings. All of those things are the things we should be focusing on.
We're in this amazing time, at least I'm feeling it this way, having sort of come back into healthcare, because I quite frankly was ready to give up personally. And I'm seeing all these wonderful investors and emerging tech companies and some pretty good things that are happening. But how do we get investors to take some of that capital, some of that money, and invest in the fray? Because we're talking about transportation policy, food insecurity. What do you think? How are we going to move people that way?
Well, I think there's a few notes of optimism. I mean, first of all, we have to continue to invest in the set of cures for the kind of conditions that are really kind of at the heart of healthcare right now. We are on the verge of solving and curing potentially cancers and central nervous system disease and all these. So it is very exciting, and it's what our country does best. What we don't do is we don't make sure that those things we build, those things we develop, those innovations get to everybody who needs them. We don't make sure that the basics and fundamentals work for people in our country who need them. And guess what? We all end up paying the price later on, because those costs are borne by hospitals, they're borne by physicians, they're borne by employers, and they raise everybody else's premiums. Increasingly, though, there's some things that are happening under the surface that are pretty exciting. For one, I think there's a new generation of people, younger than us, maybe 30-something, who are passionate entrepreneurs, tech-savvy, mission-driven, who actually see an opportunity to do well and do good at the same time. And I think those are the kinds of things that we need to nourish and to nurture. We tend to quickly slip into buzzwords and three-letter acronyms and programs that are going to save us from ourselves. It's time we actually got a little more serious about the fundamentals. And if we do that, I'm quite confident that investors will find enormous opportunities for return. And the reason I say that, Gary, is because think about it this way. You're a hospital CFO. You have a Medicaid patient in the hospital. You lose an average of about $5,000 on an admission. One of the best ways to make more money, lose less money. So if you can take care of that person, if you can pay for a van to bring that person their medication or bring them to their primary care visit and keep them out of the hospital, maybe you'll spend $200 or $300 and you'll save what will essentially be $5,000 of losses in the hospitals. And we know this. We just got to get acting that way in our communities.
So what are you doing? Because I know you're involved in a lot of different things today.
Yeah. What I really wanted to do was figure out over the next decade, what could we do so that when we're sitting here 10 years from now, what will be different? I went around the country. This is when the Affordable Care Act was under attack to be repealed. And I challenged people in Congress who were refusing to hold town halls with their constituents to say, hey, this is how democracy is supposed to work. So either you go to have a town hall in your district with your constituents, or if you don't, I'll be happy to do it. And I made this challenge, and I suggested that if they wanted to come and show up, we could have a healthy debate, or I would cede the floor to them. But if they didn't, I would explain healthcare policy and healthcare votes to their constituents. Met with over 38,000 people directly. What I learned was that there's a common American story. And that common American story that we're still building is a common American story where we keep people in a mode of sort of modest desperation and fear, where it's a desperation that some medical thing is going to happen and they won't be able to pay for it, or that they'll lose their job and won't have access to care anymore, or the drug price is going to be so high that you won't be able to afford your blood pressure medication. Or that your father or your mother won't be able to, or that they'll need to go into a nursing home and there won't be enough money. And so there's this constant cycle. So I set out to do essentially two things. The first is we launched a national health policy advocacy group called United States of Care. That group, its goal is very simple. It's to spend $100 million over the next decade to make sure that every American has access to a regular source of care and never goes bankrupt from a medical bill. That group is working right now in states on policies, and it's looking to build a common American consensus. It's not looking to say, let's have one party get 51 votes and put its will over the other party. We can't afford that. The healthcare system cannot afford to go back and forth between one solution or another. We need to take the consensus that exists in America, which is that everybody should have access to a regular source of care, and develop that out. The other thing we have to do differently, and we talked about this earlier, is we have to invest differently. We have to innovate differently. We have to innovate in the communities that need it. And so we started a group called Town Hall Ventures. Town Hall Ventures is a firm. It's myself, Trevor Price, and David Whelan are the other general partners. And we are investing in 15 companies. 15 companies who are, we believe, will have the opportunity to build really great businesses by innovating the way care is delivered in underserved and more vulnerable communities.
What are going to be the challenges? How do we not let this be just a buzz?
Look, I think most of us in healthcare are in there because we do want to do good things. I really believe that. I don't meet a lot of bad people. We have a lot of intermediaries in the business that we could cut out. We have a lot of services and products that we end up charging the consumers a lot more for than we need to. We have utilization in uncomfortable settings, institutions, hospitals, very impersonal, where we know people want to be taken care of close to their home. We know that people at certain points of their life, we underinvest. We underinvest dramatically in the first 5 years of life, and certain times we overinvest. We tend to overinvest in the last period of life. And then every time in between. So there is such an array in a $2.8 trillion plus $3 trillion economy.
I don't think that we have done a good job as a society understanding how many people live, where they live. Place matters, context matters. Yep. Andy, you've been privileged to be on both the public sector and the private sector. You've seen a lot of things change. There's a heavy political climate going on. Where's the political role in all this?
People, I think, are increasingly of the view that everybody should have access to affordable health care, and that's something we ought to be doing as a country. And I think some of that is because of the progress of the ACA, but a lot more of that, I think, has to do with the sort of existential threat that people felt over the year or so where there was this constant overhang of a potential repeal. And that repeal, as people really thought about what it mattered, how it impacted them and their neighbors, was really something that I think brought them out in force. And so today, I think you have a populace that believes we need to move firmly in that direction. The fundamental truth in all of it is that people, I think, to a large extent blame the insurance companies and to a lesser extent, but also to a great extent the pharmaceutical companies, for profiting while they see people suffering. And I think for the first time, I think we as an industry and as a community ought to understand how seriously to take that sentiment. Now, that sentiment has a distance to travel before it would become a political reality. But I think we will do better as a country if we bring the best ideas to the table, if we are all open-minded about the things we disagree with. And for people who say, boy, it's single payer, Medicare for all, I don't like that, that's threatening, et cetera. My strong advice is go try to walk a mile in the shoes of the people that are feeling like this is important. They're not all on the political left. Some of them are actually in the political right, some of them in the center, some of them are angry about the current system. We're going to have that dialogue, and we're going to have it, I think, in the next few years.
So Andy, thank you so much. This has been enlightening. It's really encouraging. It's inspirational for me. Thanks for juicing with me, and thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Cheers. Andy.
Cheers.